Hi, my name is Jim Bono. I'm an executive coach and workshop facilitator, and today I'll be your faculty for Module 2 of the Leadership Academy. And Module 2 focuses on emotional intelligence and interpersonal communication. But I wanted to provide you an initial look at some of the content specifically around emotional intelligence that will be helpful for you not only in the module, but also in your pre-meeting before the module that you'll have with your learning cohort. So in this particular video, I'm going to give you an overview and some critical information around emotional intelligence. And I'll also be pointing you to an activity that you'll be sharing with your cohort group and some other items for you to reflect on and consider that are in your briefing sheet. When I'm talking about emotional intelligence, I'm talking about your capacity to be aware and control the expression of your own emotions. Now, this isn't saying that you're controlling your emotions so that you don't have them. You're still going to have emotions when you develop emotional intelligence. It's about how you leverage the information that those emotions are giving you to build stronger relationships, to influence others, and to show up as that authentic person that you are. So emotional intelligence requires us to know ourselves, and it requires us to think about how we're engaging with others. And we're going to drill down into a lot more detail in that a little bit later in this video. Now, the second part of this module is around interpersonal communication. That's our ability to share with others our points of view, what we're thinking, how we're feeling. And that sharing is verbally, it's non-verbally, and these days, a lot of that sharing is online from Zoom. And certainly that's presented a whole nother challenge around interpersonal communication. We'll be talking about that in the module as well. But let's start with these ideas of emotional intelligence. When we begin to look at emotional intelligence, we're really looking at feelings that we have as humans. Yeah, we're talking about emotions there. Now, there are many different words that describe emotions, right? We're glad, we're sad, we're mad, we have fear. Many theorists would say those are the four primary emotions and everything else results from those. But again, doesn't matter where you're born, we all experience emotion at times that could be rooted into this idea of glad, sad, mad, or having some kind of fear. We also have thoughts, and thoughts are different than emotion. Thoughts are our core beliefs, the things that we know. Thoughts are our judgments that we make about whether it's safe to talk to somebody or to go a certain direction. Our thoughts are the insights that we gain, that we learn over times. Now, a lot of times this language gets confused for people, and you'll hear people say, well, I really feel that we should do X, Y, and Z. Well, notice they said they feel that we should do something. That's a judgment or a belief that needs to happen. It's a thought, but in the English language, we often say, I feel that we need to do this. I just want to recognize that that's not a feeling, it's a thought. And I think we weaken our language when we aren't clear about what's our thoughts, what are our feelings. Now, the third component of this that we just need to get some basics around is we have feelings, we have thoughts, and we also have wants. We need something. We're expressing a want, whether that's to be included in a conversation, whether that's to get some information that we need in order to be successful, whether that's to be appreciated or to be acknowledged. Each human has some kind of want and need desire in them. And emotional intelligence needs us to understand the difference between our feelings and our thoughts and what we want. And as we begin to explore this concept, you'll see that this may not be as easy as it might appear. Now, in order to start to break these apart, I think it's helpful to see where these things come from. And to do that, we're going to look at the biology of the brain and how that relates to emotional intelligence. It's a very basic view of the brain here, looking at three key components that will help us understand these ideas of thoughts and feelings and wants, and how we really don't have control over a lot of this. Now, if you look at the diagram, there are these three key components. Start with the spinal cord. Spinal cord, of course, is in the back of your neck, and it connects up to the base part of your brain. I think of the spinal cord as kind of the information highway. It's pulling in all of the things that we're sensing around us, and it's sending those into the brain to be processed. Now, when those go into the brain, one of the first places that all that data hits is a tiny little gland in the limbic system of the brain, and the name of that gland is the amygdala. Now, the amygdala, some people call this the fight or flight center of the brain. It's a part of the brain that you really don't have any control over. This is your brain telling you through emotion that you're safe or that you need to run out of fear. It's telling you whether it's happy about something that's happening around you or maybe frustrated around something that's happening. Now, the emotions are just coming like this, whoop, straight up from the spinal cord and into the amygdala. But notice they haven't hit that thought center yet. It's the thought center in the brain. It's the biggest part of our brain. It sits on top and it's called the prefrontal cortex. Now that's where logic comes from. That's where our rational thinking comes from. And that part of the brain doesn't receive this data that we're seeing around us until the data goes through the amygdala first. So if you look at it visually, again, there's some kind of event that happens outside of us, external to us. Maybe we see two people talking in the hallway, and one of these people is somebody that we just had a tough conversation with, and the other person they're talking to is the boss. Like we see that data goes to our amygdala. And again, the amygdala's job is to say, are you safe or are you not safe? Well, the amygdala's immediate thing might be, you're not safe. You had a run-in with this other person. Now they're talking to your boss. You need to do something. Now, that is the amygdala doing its job, taking care of you, trying to provide safety. Now, before our current office days, and maybe thousands of years ago, whenever we were cave women and men, or however you want to call that, that sense of safety was about life and death. We knew that we don't go near that bush or over by where that animal is because other people go there and they don't come back. So that gets imprinted in us, and our amygdala knows, avoid that. The other thing the amygdala knows is that it needs people in order to survive. So it wants us to come together. It's looking for that social connection with people. Because, again, those cavemen and cave women were dependent upon the social network in order to survive every day. Now, as that information about your boss talking to somebody else travels into your amygdala where you think, oh no, they're talking about me and something's happened, a split second later, that information is going to hit your prefrontal cortex. And an emotionally intelligent person says, you know what? They have a lot of other things that they're probably talking about, and it's probably not about me. And so rather than impulse running over there and interrupting the conversation and defending myself, maybe the emotionally intelligent thing to do is just to sit back, to not do anything, because if something needs to be followed up on, they're going to follow up on it. But I just need to stay here. Now, again, that's not the original spark that comes out of your brain when it hits the amygdala, because the amygdala is not thinking rationally. The amygdala is only about survival and safety. And so as we begin to process what we're seeing and we give ourselves time for the prefrontal cortex to catch up, we're able to see that we're not actually in danger. One way that you might want to think about this is, have you ever said anything out of love or anger that you later regretted? When I ask this question in person, most people say, yes, I have done that. And I'm sure many of you are saying, yes, at some point in my life, I've said something I've regretted, probably out of anger or love. Now, if you look at it this way and think about this, wow, I was triggered in my amygdala because I saw something that either made me angry or made me love. And without thinking about it, without giving it a chance to get to my prefrontal cortex, without taking a breath, I just acted out. Now, an emotionally intelligent person finds a way to create space between that triggering event and acting out. That space allows your prefrontal cortex to catch up and to see the situation a bit more rationally than your amygdala does. This is how we exercise emotional intelligence. And a lot of times it's like, as soon as we are aware of that triggering event, if I can just take a breath, a lot of times the triggering event even keeps us from breathing, and then we're even more likely to lash out. But if I can notice, something just got triggered in me, take a breath, see if my prefrontal cortex can catch up. Now, I'm describing this as if it is very easy, and I'm sure many of you out there have mastered this, and some of you may see that this doesn't seem like it's easy at all. It takes practice. For every time I catch myself, there's 2 or 3 times that I don't. But I'm aware of them. And the more that I'm aware and the sooner that I can act on that impulse, really the more emotional intelligence I'm showing, because I'm giving my prefrontal cortex a chance to be rational and to think through the emotion that my amygdala has given me. Now, another way, again, to think about this is, look, a lot of times in life, you're sitting down with somebody and there's tension in the conversation maybe, and there's some things that you really want to say. You get triggered, you get angry, and you'd like to say something to them that lets them know how you feel. But then you think, you know what? I am a leader here. I do want to influence this person. I want to be in better relationship with them. So you kind of go from what I want to say to what you should say. And that should is around building a better relationship and still being authentic. That should is about working with the other person and being genuine in your response, but genuine in a way that, again, helps build that relationship. Now, this idea of, contrasting what you want to say with what you should say is actually a useful exercise to reflect on some previous conversations that maybe didn't go as well as you'd like. So what I'm going to ask you to do right now is to reflect on a conversation that you've had, either professionally or personally, that didn't go as well as you would have liked, for whatever reason. I would think try to use a pretty recent example. Now, what I'd like you to do is remember that conversation and think about as much as you can, what did you want to say to that person? And then what should you really say to that person in order to have a better relationship? And actually pull out a piece of paper and write down on one column on the piece of paper, this is what I wanted to say. And on the other column, this is what I should say. I'm going to ask you to pause the video now to reflect on that conversation and to write some of these down. You'll be sharing the outcome of this in your cohort group whenever you meet. All right, welcome back from that activity about what you wanted to say versus what you should say. And what I hope is that as you went through that real life example, you were able to really connect that example to what we learned about in the brain and the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, and how all of that works together to create what it is that you say and how you're interacting with others. In your briefing sheet, you'll see a request to read an article from Daniel Goleman. Daniel Goleman is considered the father of emotional intelligence. He did many books, did a lot of research about this in the beginning. One of his latest books, it's a few years old now, it's called Primal Leadership. It's a very good book around emotional intelligence. But Daniel Goleman, the article that I've asked you to read comes from his Harvard Business Review, one of his first writings about emotional intelligence. It's a classic, and it will expand on all the concepts that I've talked about and help you have a greater understanding of emotional intelligence and help prepare you for some of the pre-work and some of the work that you'll do with your cohort group. So let's talk about some of that now. In your pre-work, in addition to that article that I just mentioned on Daniel Goleman, there's a couple of additional videos that will talk about interpersonal communication and listening. So I'm going to ask you to look at all of those parts of the pre-work, and we've got some reflection questions there for you to answer with those as well. After you go through that and look at those reflection questions, you'll be meeting with your cohort. And I've actually got a list of things that I'd like you to discuss with your cohort as well, to start sharing these concepts that you're learning about emotional intelligence and learning from them. What are they connecting with that you're not? How do they understand emotional intelligence before they ever listen to this? And why is it relevant to them in their role as corporate counsel? I would encourage you to have these conversations, and specifically, I'll be asking you to think about some of the strengths and weaknesses that you see in yourself. Again, those would be in the reflection questions as well. Now, this briefing sheet and this video gets you all set to have that cohort meeting with your group, finish all the rest of that pre-work, and then when we come together for our live Zoom class in a few weeks, we'll be picking up from here and engaging in more conversation about maybe how you've seen bosses display emotional intelligence or not throughout your career. We'll also talk about what hinders your ability to display and engage in emotional intelligence and some of those concepts. Then in the second part of that workshop, we'll be looking at interpersonal communication. So all of these connect together. I encourage you to complete the pre-work, engage in open, honest conversation with your people in your cohort, and then we'll come together and complete Module 2. And you will continue to develop your emotional intelligence and interpersonal communication skills to be a much more effective leader and influencer from your place within the organization. Thank you.